here, I think.
You can start when you want.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here with you. I hope you have enjoyed the day. At the end of the day, I also hope not to be too extensive and that information will be well received. I'm here to start with this presentation and to speak to you about the company that I work with and our challenges and what we have been promoting for the benefit of knowledge on natural cork stoppers in a global market. And hopefully I will then explain or prepare the ground for Antonio Cesar that will speak on our latest technologies and our latest innovation. So to be very concise, I'm here on behalf of Cork Supply. We are a company, a worldwide company supplying cork closures. We have been in the market for around 40 years, a little more than that. We have 14 units worldwide, and 10% of our people are dedicated to activities related to R&D and QC, which tells a little bit or a lot about our genes, our genetics, and a way to reach our dream. Recently, we have discussed about what's the purpose of our company, and it ultimately is to be admired as a partner of the wine business. This is just a global map, just to show where we are operating right now. A little bit everywhere where there's wine or spirits or sparkling wine, there's an activity related to our products. Why we are speaking of corks? Approximately 7 out of 10 bottles in the world are stoppered with a cork, not with alternatives. And that's the main reason why we're here. It's a closure that has been demonstrated its advantages, and it has also been recognized by the market. These are just examples of market research showing the value added on the wine business related to the type of closure used. So, as you can see here, for example, on the top 100 on the 100 top wines in the US, more or less 2/3, a little more than 2/3, go with cork closures. That tells about the premiumization of our product in the wine business. If you look here at your right, we can also see the trends on pricing of wines worldwide, and we can see a major or a greater increase in value of wines sold with corks compared to alternative closures. So that's part of what we want to tell you, is that really there's also the image that we transmit to the wine, to the market, and how it tells about the perceived quality. So we are talking about the cork now, but why is it so special? And not, I don't want to go into much detail, and most of you probably have seen something similar like this, but it is this physical and chemical structure and this geometry that makes this material so special. So we are talking about a light, impermeable, elastic material that goes very much in line with stoppering of bottles of wine. Being this said, it's natural, so it has all the advantages of being a natural, but we have major challenges. And one of them is related to the fact that most of the times we think this just as a simple piece in the wine packaging. But if you look into more detail, it's really a complex system. It's not only the cork inside the bottleneck, it's all the parameters around the choice of the bottleneck and the bottling line, and I will try also to elaborate a little bit about other factors affecting the performance. So let's talk about how complex this system is. Just looking to the corking process, we start with a cork, so a simple cylinder with a certain amount of air inside the cells, and during the corking process, it is compressed and then released into the bottleneck. And this means that the mechanical strengths or the mechanical impacts on the material are enormous, and definitely at the end, when the cork sits in this bottleneck, which is not a complete cylinder, it will adapt to a new volume. By doing that, of course, there is a raise in pressure inside the cells of the material. Because of that, then the cylinder, the original cylinder, adapts to a new volume, and the air trapped into the cells will necessarily, I would say, release to both sides of the material. So this means that a part of the pressure of oxygen, partial pressure inside the cells, will release to the wine, and the other part to the outside. But this will depend on the bottling conditions. So let's look into a little more detail. What we aim to transmit and to drive you is to check on how different parameters do impact on the cork performance. We will not speak on all of them. We will mostly focus on these corking and bottle filling, the size relationship, and then the storage conditions. Okay, so this is another example. We mentioned about the bottleneck. When we look at bottlenecks, and we have ways of measuring the internal bore, we do see a lot of differences. These are just examples of two types of lots, where even if the specifications, the common specifications are met, they do show different shapes of the inside of the bottleneck. So what does this tell us? That maybe the cork performance will be affected by it. Let me just rephrase here differently. The specifications for the bottlenecks, they are as wide as what is represented here on the left. We can have differences up to 3 millimeters from the top to the more or less 45 millimeters depth, whereas for the dimensions of the corks, diameter cannot, by reference, cannot vary more than 0.4 millimeters. So this is really a challenge also. How can we assure that every cork with the exact specification will still perform beautifully in a bottleneck that can be as variable as is represented here? So we have done some trials, some tests, comparing, in this case, what is the impact of the bottle shape to the extraction force. So maybe in a winery, this is not so important, but when you look to the consumer and the person that will open the bottle and will appreciate your wine, this has an impact. So the perception of easiness of opening may be affected by the bottle shape. Moreover, these specifications for extraction forces are also used in common quality control laboratories. So sometimes we risk of failing the specification just because the bottleneck was not the exact one that we did the trials with. So this is one part of it. So then the bottlenecks, they will have other types of influences on the performance. This is just, as I said, an example of parameter that can be affected. Okay, so now there's the other question that very often we are asked about. What is the preferred, or what is the optimal cork closure for wine aging? We have heard today, and yesterday I heard at least 2 times, about how important it is, the wine matrix, for its own capacity of evolving, of aging. So when we talk about that, very often we forget that the closure will not change that character. So when you ask, well, what's the optimal wine closure for wine aging? It depends on not only the matrix, but also the expected aging that we have a long time. So we can either have a closure that will kind of accelerate the drinkability of the wine, for example, by promoting a little more oxygen ingress. Therefore, we can reduce the time wine aging for the consumer to appreciate it. But on the other side, we can also supply cork closures, based on lower permeability for a longer aging in the bottle. Unfortunately, our conversation with the winemakers is not often clear enough so that we are able to really engage with a clear optimization of the closure. Anyway, what is relevant today is that I would say the whole cork industry, and in our house in particular, we have portfolio of products that can engage with different approachability, if you will, of the wine to the market. So let's talk again about this complex system. And let's, now that we are speaking about the aging, and aging is a lot about the oxygen management, and let's think of what is happening in a bottle from the filling to the continuation of the corking. So here in this picture that I took from a manual built by Uwe Mox in Valladolid. But basically what we are here to transmitting is that at the bottling, at the filling, and at the corking, we have multiple sources of oxygen. Of course, you have been already exposed to this type of information. We have the below part, the oxygen that is dissolved in the wine, and we have this part that is preserved, or that is captured in the headspace. We call these the total package oxygen. And it's also only after corking that we can speak of the oxygen related to the closure. So at the same time, we have, or at the initial stages in the bottling, we have these 3 sources of oxygen. And this total package oxygen, of course, is a function of the time, because the wine will also consume the oxygen, and because then, once settled in the bottleneck, the closure will allow some micro-oxygenation of the wine. Now, if we look to the dissolved and headspace of oxygen, you might read from the bottling lines, multiple options are available. And you can have something as high as 2 milligrams of oxygen at the initial stage, or you can have virtually 0, something around 0.2. And this is nothing related to the closure. It's just the condition around which the filling was performed. So inerting options will impact the initial package, total package oxygen. Moreover, we mentioned a moment ago about the diameter of the closure, how important it is to have it correctly proper selection in relation to diameter of bottleneck, but the length is also important. On one side, because of assuring of a perfect sealing, a perfect pressure against the glass, and the glass is a little conic, but also because of the potential of raising the headspace pressure in case there's no vacuum, there's no inerting during the bottling line. In this example here, we're just showing that if we don't use inertization and if we don't have any vacuum, we can raise the dissolved oxygen by 2 times, just because of the pressurizing of the headspace that is full, let's say, or saturated by air. That's another example of how important it is to select the right dimensions of the cork. These are examples of audits. In this case, they were done in Spain by this research group in Valladolid. And it's showing, as others have also shown, that there is a variation in total package oxygen in the different bottling lines. So these are 3 different wineries and along different measurements, and we can see variations not only on the dissolved oxygen, but also on the headspace oxygen, in total variations that we can multiply easily by 2 or even 3. So let's focus now a little bit on how the oxygen ingress from a closure, and in this case particularly from the cork closure, how is it explained during the corking and after the corking. So let's take here this graph over time, and we have a plot that looks like this. So we have the initial oxygen virtually 0, and then there's an initial apparent ingress, and I will explain why I'm saying apparent, but there's an initial raise of oxygen that will then continue to a plateau of a very low slope. So these initial shoot of oxygen, and I said apparent oxygen ingress, it's what we call the release of oxygen related to the raise in the pressure of the cells due to the compression. So that's why I said it's apparent ingress. It's just the oxygen captured in the material that is released due to the raise in pressure. Then we have the second phase, and now it's really the oxygen going from the outside to the inside due to diffusion phenomena. So we try to explain this with simple models, empirical models, that, by measuring the amount of oxygen ingress using this type of instrument, a presence element with sensitive dots to the presence of oxygen. And from our internal research, we have seen that, for example, the impact of temperature is relevant. So it means that when we are asked to tell about what's the oxygen ingress, of course, we do supply this information based on standard conditions, but we don't have a control, for example, during the storage of the bottles. Moreover, we tried also to use this type of model, empirical modeling, to explain what is happening during these initial and subsequent phases of oxygen ingress. So here is the amount of oxygen that we measure with this technique, okay? This is the, represents the maximum pressure of oxygen a long time. It's a prediction of the future. And this model has 2 empirical parameters. One is related to the shape of these curve, so when it starts to have a raise mainly, and then you have on the bottom another variable that is dependent mostly on the temperature, as we're going to see. So we compare these variables, these empirical variables, when using at the same temperature, but bottles stored in contact with the liquid or just without any contact. And what we could see is that the shape of the curve is completely changed, and this is represented here by the beta. And although this is an empirical method, empirical model, it tells us about what is probably the mechanistic representation of what is happening. So with the contact with the liquid, we do see a difference in this beta, telling us that most probably we are under a different mechanism regime of oxygen ingress. And we also see that the I told you, the future, the expected maximum pressure of oxygen is just 4 times, about 4 to 5 times less when we have the liquid in contact with the cork closure. So this means, again, that the storage conditions also play a role in how much oxygen the closure may transfer to the wine. So as a quick summary, quick wrap-up before just presenting the innovation here, we know that there are many factors that impact the bottling line, the performance of the cork. Some of them related to oxygen management, others impacting the mechanical performance, and finally, ultimately, for sure, also the wine aging potential. The wine aging can be affected by these use conditions. So we have been challenged by the cork closures anyway, forever, and will continue to be challenged by that. And even if we don't control all the variables, there's one that we can control. That's what we manufacture. So our road was to find a way of assuring that each individual closure performs exactly the same way under the exact same conditions. And this is what we call consistency. We know that, like grapes, cork is a natural material with certain variability, and our vision of consistency has been related to individually controlled closures. And this means sensory verification and also structural verification. Antonio Cesar will after explain better about this functionality part. It is related to the oxygen management through the corks. And for the first time ever, we have introduced technology that is capable of identifying corks that have structures related to higher or to different oxygen ingresses. This is called X100, a technology powered by artificial intelligence. And in this graph, what we aim to show is a representation of what we have learned for the last decade. We know that natural corks, even if they are variable, they are very much concentrated on a low oxygen ingress range, as is seen here on this frequency graph. But we have found that there's a small percentage of elements that do have 5 or 10 times higher oxygen than the standard corks. And our challenge was to find a way to identify those and to eliminate them from the production line. And this is what we have done with the new technology. So there's a quick video just explaining briefly what it is about. I will just let you view it quickly. And just to conclude, we have introduced this new technology in a product that we call Legacy. Basically, it's a product that combines the best of the world of today. It's an inspection, all of them non-destructive means for sensory consistency, for the absence of trichloronazole, and for first time ever, the functionality related to the oxygen ingress. I will leave the word to Antonio, and just very briefly, just to tell you that we are very happy to be recognized, to have been recognized, acknowledged by these events for the innovation of this new technology. So thank you very much, and I will lead now to Antonio.
So, good afternoon. Thank you, Cristina. And I hope to keep you awake for this late in the afternoon. Liz will take over after. So, I will try to do my job for you, Liz. When Cristina was presenting was all the different streams of variability that can play into this changes that we observe in oxidation into the sensory profile of the wine. So from our perspective here in innovation was we were seeking to do a part of the job that needs to be done, or needed to be done, which was the quantification of or classification of the oxygen that go through the solid object in real time, or as fast as possible, in order to be applicable into industry settings, and that could allow us to screen and separate according to certain parameters. So for that we need, that's the objectives that we are also discussing, to understand, to perfectly understand the internal structure of the natural product, then to correlate the lab measurements from OTR that was presented here also with the features that could be present on the structure, and then finally, most importantly, to make due diligence and comply with what we are expecting to do, to share with our colleagues with the chemistry what is the impact of those measurements into the wine, using the molecules as a proxy for the sensory quality of or evaluation of the product. Okay, the journey started by understanding what were the characteristics, the parameters that could play a role from a natural product into the oxygen transfer. In this graphic, we see in the x-axis, we see the measurements that have been done at the lab. So each one of the dots represent a cork that has been bottled and then aged for 3 months, 6 months, and then OTR was measured. And on Y, you have cork density. So that was something that misled us for a long period of time, because we were under this perception or in conception that there was a correlation between the density and the oxygen transfer rate from the natural cork, which we can see clearly that there is no correlation. We understand why, because natural cork is a multi-layer material, so we can have arrangements on this material that led to the same density and on the same, for the two corks with the same density would have a different permeability or a different OTR. So that's no correlation. We identify this IUTR, and that allows us also to do a notation of the internal structure, try to dive deep into the internal structure of the cork, and trying to correlate some of these I values, in particular these ones that we are highlighting here, with the existing structures into the solid. So we needed to source some machines, some techniques. Obviously, we need radiation to go inside, to penetrate, to simulate, and to see what oxygen goes through. And simultaneously acquire data that now we could use and take advantage of the new toolbox, which is what everybody talk about, the big data, and then what comes with that, the opportunities like the algorithms for deep learning, like AI describes generically. Okay, so the setup that we put in place here between the university and also the company was we had an inspection station where close to the raw material enters into the inspection station. The corks are inspected. We annotate the corks. We do the Instagrammers. So we say this is okay or this is not okay according to a certain feature. Then the material is a non-invasive or non-destructive technique, is bottled. It's used to be bottled on empty glass, in empty bottles. And we use a method to measure the OTR. And then we model using the X matrix from the OTR performance that we observe it during time with a Y, which is the tag that we get from the user that visually try to identify structures that could be responsible for this I value. Then that was replaced by the algorithm itself, where we introduced just the image and then the Y being the OTR, and then build a model with a certain architecture that we will present and try to see what would be the power of classification. Okay, so material methods, what we have done, we used the presence sensor for oxygen. So there was a setup established at Cork Supply that allow us to do each month more than 30 samples. So we needed a long time to create a data set that were able to not overfit with this deep learning machine algorithms. Then there was also the bottle profile that was controlled, and we used for this validation that I will show after, always the bottles that presented the similar pattern. So we sort them using a simple PCA, see what was the most different and the most similar. And then as a chemical biomarkers, we use the phenylestaldehyde, the strachaldehyde that is recognized as being a biomarker for oxidation. And this represents the degradation of amino acids through striker degradation, so to be more precise. So it comprehends the oxidation from phenolics with the degradation of the amino acids without the sugars. Then the furfurals for sugar degradation, and we put a sotolone, just a molecule that we know that it play a role on the aroma of some wines, and we want to see if that was promoted on that trial. Then on an untarget approach, we were more focused into the non-volatile component of the wine, and mainly the antioxidant in particular, using cyclic voltammetry to profile and see the fingerprint, and then compare to see if we could again do a match between corks that presented no features with corks that would be responsible or presented the features that are responsible for a large amount of oxygen that go through. Then the wines we treated, we select a white wine, something that need to be oxidized faster. So white wines. We supplemented a part of the volume with metals. In that treatment, the idea is to get it faster oxidized, and then both of them, treated with metals and the control, were divided in two, and submitted to high temperature regimes for a forced staging to see if we could perceive for the compound that we are targeting were expressed with higher speed, with higher kinetics. Then the inspection was done with our technology, and we divided in two: the L corks, the corks that we see that have a normal performance, and the ones that we call it non-L, non-legacy, that are presenting some abnormal structures that were and presented also higher OTR. So this is just what we also needed to learn. We call it here the cork anatomy. We need to understand what were the rules and what were the basics of this multi-layer material. And we understand what are the pores, what are the ear veins, and that needed to be cleared from the algorithm, not to be mistaken. And we saw that the outliers had some materials that generate different intensity, in particular, through the entire cork, and that led to higher transfer of oxygen. It makes sense for us, and then we needed to validate it. So what we are saying to the market is also that we are moving from image, we're connecting the image to the function, so we are moving from visual quality, which is a proxy for what is expected to happen with a natural cork, to function, because we are able to see inside and to classify on an industrial scale and provide with the real function of the material. Okay, the deep learning architecture that we use is a ResNet 3D. That was because we have different frames for each one of the material, and we are able to do this, we train it according to the good practice, and we are able to do the classification in 10 milliseconds. So that was okay to deploy into a machine on the edge in order to be sorting and do the classification that we need, segregating the corks that presented features, the ones with IOTR from the ones that do not present features, that have the normal structure and the variability from OTR that is expected to be observed from natural cork. Okay, these are the results that we got from OTR. So we see on the L corks, without the feature, that we have oxygen pressure here really very close together. So on the bottom, on the green, not very much, the variability is not very high. So that's what we are looking for. And then on the red, on your right, I think, you see the corks with the feature, and we see they spread all over. We have from 5 to 10 increase in amount of oxygen ingress, and that we believe that is responsible for this perception of the natural cork being responsible for in the more variability in oxidation in our bottles of wines, in our case of wines, and obviously if we remove them, then the variability would be more virtuous, and the variability that the winemakers are looking for this type of product. Then again, now as a box plot, we see the representation. So we have a cutoff, very clear. That's what the machine was learning to do. And then to finish this on a single slide, we did targeted non-target. So on the target, you see this mountain. This is the cyclic voltammetry with oxidation scan and reduction scan. So it works from Paul Kilmartin or Mauricio Gliano. That's the standard approach that we can benchmark and compare. Then we apply this PLSTA to classify, to see if we could, what was the failing rate. And we see that all wines that were treated and scanned with the cyclic voltammetry, all wines that use the corks that do not present any feature are represented in green in one side of the PLS box, score plot here. And then the reds, we see the impact on the antioxidant fraction of the wines that were exposed for 6 months of aging, some of them forced aging, that we see then as target, on the biomarkers on the left, on the histograms, where we see furfurols, phenylacetaldehyde, and sotalol. In reds, those are the corks that are presented the features, so the outlier, high regimes of oxygen, that do not translate very much in furfural as expected. But then on the striker aldehyde, phenylacetaldehyde, we see it very clearly that mainly for the forced aging, we see a huge increase with translating this availability of oxygen. But then even on the samples that was stored at room temperature, we see statistical significant difference between the concentration of the legacy corks, not without outlier, with outlier. Then for Sotolon, we see also the same trend. So that was the idea, is to make transparency here and to show our colleagues what would be the impact of using those corks on a molecular base into the wine, both for volatiles and non-volatiles. And obviously, the expectation that we have that this behavior validates what we think, that Cristina was presenting, the consistency that we are committed to achieve from a natural product, which is a challenging system, but that's what we have, is natural. And we believe that is a solid product if we have the technologies that guarantee to the market that we comply with certain intervals of acceptability according to the parameters in the situation, the OTR. So, final remarks, we are using deep learning and AI. That's something that I don't want to go into making a kind of a very big hype on that. Those are the toolbox that we have. That's it. We just use it. We were opportunistic. We try to create a blue ocean into the market because we had that capacity. We had invested in R&D from the last 10 years, so we could make it happen. Then we are able to do this sorting in production, identifying the OTR, which are a small amount, 3% of corks that we can remove. And doesn't mean that they are not performing to sealing the wine, but they do not perform at the level that we want, so we remove it. And we see that those outliers have translation into the molecular impact of the wine on the volatile profile, and also into the antioxidant profile. And we showing here in this presentation. So removing those corks, in our perspective, we can really underline that we have improving the consistency of a natural product that we have available to us. So thank you very much for your attention, and we are happy to answer some questions.